and the love that he had for his spouse, and his spouse's love that she had for him. We're going to be talking about, inshaAllah, the companion Ja'far bin Abi Talib, inshaAllah, radiyallahu anhu. Now, first off, to understand who Ja'far is, we have to know his lineage, right? So, Abdullah is the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and his father is Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was even born, he was a yatim, he was an orphan. And at the age of 6, his mother passed away. At this moment, Abdul Muttalib took care of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when his mother passed, up until the age of 8. On the deathbed of Abdul Muttalib, first off, rewind back a little bit. For anyone here, inshallah, that one day will become a father or that's a father already. At the age of 6, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would sit on the lap of Abdul Muttalib. I want you to imagine that. At the age of 6, a lot of our kids are on their phones, playing Plants vs. Zombies, playing Pokemon. Are they in those powerful gatherings that you're having, where you're talking to people about how to show rahmah towards one another, how to show love towards one another? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was exposed to this at the age of 6, being on the lap of Abdul Muttalib. And when Abdul Muttalib would be eating dinner, he wouldn't start eating until he would say, "Bring me my son," meaning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. "I will not eat until I have my son with me." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I want you to imagine that. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam under the care of Abdul Muttalib. On the deathbed of Abdul Muttalib, he had 14 children. Some of the notable ones, Abdullah and Abbas, Hamza and Abu Lahab. On his deathbed, he looks at Abu Talib and he says, to take care of Muhammad. He's a very special boy. And I don't want to go into depth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at this age of 8, but Abu Talib took care of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam like his own son. He would accompany him on traveling. There's the story of when the Prophet Muhammad went with Abu Talib to an area, and there's this instance where they meet this monk who is yearning for this person that is going to become a prophet, and the shade of the tree leans over Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the monk goes to Abu Talib and says, "Do you see that? Do you see how the cloud follows the son of yours? Do you see how the tree leans on top of Muhammad, of your son? This is something that we've read in scriptures that only a prophet would have. He's a very special boy. Take care of him. He's a very special boy." Now Abu Talib was the ammu of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. His children were of 7, the notable Aqil, Ja'far and Ali. And each of his kids had special names, and Ja'far's special name was high eloquence, flowing speech, someone that could talk very beautifully. This is what Ja'far means. This is how Abu Talib would name his children. And the mother to Ja'far was Fatima bint Asad. Abu Talib was not wealthy. He was very generous. He was not wealthy, he was very generous. Now, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ got older, the family decided to lighten the burden of Abu Talib. So they said, "Listen, Abu Talib, we want to help you out. Divide your children amongst us." So Abu Talib loved Aqil, he took Aqil. Ali radiallahu anhu went to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Al-Abbas went to, Ja'far went to Al-Abbas. Now, who is Ja'far radiallahu anhu? I want you to imagine this. It's mentioned that Ja'far looked like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he looked like him. And there's a hadith that I will share in a little bit when we talk about Hamza's daughter. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that was similar to Rasulullah in character as well, in akhlaq. Not only did he look like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he had similar character. He is the brother of Ali and the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ali was about the age of 4 when he was under the care of the Prophet Muhammad, and he was about 7 when the Prophet Muhammad became a prophet. About 10 years older than the Prophet is Ali in comparison to Ja'far. So Ja'far is a little bit older than Ali, which means there's a little bit of a different relationship. Ali was like a child to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like a own son. Ja'far was like that cool brother, right? More of a closer brother. Now, I'm sorry, 10 years older than the Prophet. Now, Ja'far was one of the first 20 that accepted the religion of Islam. It's mentioned, some scholars say, as early as 14 to 15. Who were those that accepted Islam before Ja'far or around that same category? Khadija, Ali, Zayd, Abu Bakr, Waraka, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, Fatima, Ayman, Uthman, Yasir bin Amr, Ammar bin Yasir, Abu Dhar, Sumayya bin Khattab, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqas, and Bilal ibn Rabah, Abdullah bin Masud. These were some of the categories. When you think of these people that I just mentioned, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them. These are amazing people. Ja'far is amongst them. But when you think of Ja'far, who is he? I don't know. Everyone knows Abu Bakr. Everyone knows Umar. Everyone knows Uthman bin Affan. Everyone knows Ali. Who's Ja'far? Who's one of the closest to the Prophet Muhammad in looks and in character? He was married to Asma bin Umays. Now, I want you to remember Asma. Her story is heartbreaking, but Allah has honored her. I want you to remember this. So, during the early ages of Islam, during the early part of Islam, this requires a talk in itself. The Muslims had to hide their religion. You and I, bro, we walk around in thawbs and kufis, we walk around with a beard, we're proud, Allahu Akbar, we're praying in school. During the early ages of Islam, the Muslims had to hide their religion. Now, for anyone that's ever known someone that became a Muslim, took their shahada, some of them have to hide their religion from their mother and father. You and I, that were born Muslim, will never ever witness what that looks like. Even like, subhanAllah, is this for the older people too? They're youth, no? MashaAllah, okay. They're just for the kids? Oh, that's everyone's kids. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. Everyone knows where Oklahoma is, Texas, the South, right? When you go to the South, you and I think white people, they don't know where Muslims are. I went to Oklahoma, wallahi, the Muslim community there is so beautiful. And everyone knows this Muslim community that's right by a university. You think this happened overnight? 1400 years ago, I want to remind you all that the Muslims were tortured by the Quraysh. There's a moment during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life where he went home. This is during the year of sorrow, after Abu Talib passed away. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is walking home, and people left the stomach, intestines of a camel, and feces and garbage on the door of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we're talking about 10 years of preaching, maybe? What does the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? You want to talk about you and I? Someone talks bad about Islam? Brother! Listen. You and I in the masjid, we're acting like that. A non-Muslim, what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? Everyone's looking at him, pointing the finger, laughing. This is when he lost Khadija, radiyallahu anha, and Abu Talib. He's already heartbroken. He picks up the stomach intestines and the feces and the garbage, and he throws it away with his own hand, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He walks into his home, and he's a single father of 4 daughters. A single father of 4 daughters. Fatima takes a bucket of water, places the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hands in the water, and starts to clean the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hands. as she is crying, the Prophet Muhammad says, "Do not cry, my dear daughter." This is 10 years into prophethood. Abu Jahl mentioned that the Prophet Muhammad was in his sajda. And Abu Jahl, he's with his friends. And his friends are like, "Hey, look at Muhammad, look what he's doing. Look at him praying in front of the Kaaba. Go do something. Why don't you do something about it? Yalla, be a man, bro." What does Abu Jahl do? He takes a scarf and he places it around the neck of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, places his foot on the back and pulls onto the scarf. It's a few years into prophethood. Bilal radiallahu anh, when they found out that he was a Muslim, they tortured him. They placed him, his bleeding back, on the hot sand, placed a rock on his stomach, and all he would say was Ahadun Ahad. And he said, "Why did you keep saying Ahadun Ahad?" He said, "It made all the people that were torturing me mad." You and I, what's our biggest fear in life? Making sure we lose weight, go to the gym, make sure our blood pressure is low. These Muslims were pure people that had tawheed in their heart. Ja'far radiallahu an had to migrate to Abyssinia. He was the first ambassador of Islam. There was a group of small people that were a small batch of Muslims that went, 15 people. They had to hide their religion too in Abyssinia, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, Al-Najashi there was the Christian king that was there. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said he would not tolerate injustice. He was a very just person. Now, it's mentioned that, we'll talk about it in a second, I'll spoil it anyways. Al-Najashi becomes a Muslim. And he keeps La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, a paper inside of his jacket. If he were to tell all of these people, "I'm a Muslim, I believe in what Ja'far is saying about the Prophet Muhammad, I believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam," he would die. So when he would talk, they would say, "Are you Muslim? Did you become a Muslim?" He would touch his heart. He says, "My religion is right here." He had to hide, and he's a king. He had to hide his religion. Be proud that you're Muslim. Be proud of the sacrifices that all of these companions did. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, for 23 years, Quran was coming to him, and people would torture, ridicule him and all of the companions. 1400 years later, the Quran is on a shelf to collect dust, when blood was shed for it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a better understanding. So a small batch of Muslims went to Abyssinia, about 15 people. Ja'far goes with the second batch of Muslims, about 97 people. Some scholars say 88, some people say a little bit over 100, about 97. And he was the leader, he was the first ambassador of Islam. And not only that, listen to this. He was in his early 20s, maybe 21 years old. 21-year-old kid nowadays, this is what they're doing. They're on TikTok. They're playing video games. They're trying to go on ChatGPT to figure out how they're going to pass their test and do an essay for ChatGPT. For those that don't know what ChatGPT is, anyways. What happens? Ja'far radiallahu an, the first batch of Muslims, the Quraysh were like, "Let him go. Whatever." But they didn't come back. So the Quraysh, they were like, "Bro, we can't do this. If this king is accepting the Muslims, we can't do this." So the Quraysh sent Amr bin al-As and Abdullah bin Abi Rabi' to Al-Najashi. Why? First off, one of them was good friends. The father was good friends with Al-Najashi. They brought the king gifts, and they brought the general gifts: leather, coats, clothes. And also, one thing that's powerful is the Quraysh had a good relationship. So there's this diplomatic nature of it. In addition to this, the religion was also different than the Muslims. So who went with Ja'far radiallahu anhu? Uthman bin Affan, Ruqayyah, the Prophet's daughter, Uthman's wife, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, and Uthman bin Auf are some of the 97 that went. Now, Ja'far radiallahu anhu, it's mentioned that these two people of Quraysh walk into the king, the palace, the courtyard of Al-Najashi. He's a very noble person. He sees his friends. What's going on? How are you? Mwah, mwah. What's up? Long time no see. How's Baba? How's Mecca? All this. He says, listen, there are people that are horrible, that are insulting your religion and my religion. You know the Quraysh, what they would do? During the pilgrimage, when people would come to Mecca and worship the statues, worship the idols, they would come at the outskirts of Mecca and shout out, there's a man named Muhammad and he's hurting people and he's doing this and he's saying this. So they would cover their ears. They see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and he's a rahmah. And they become Muslims anyways. No matter what the Quraysh says, it backfired. It backfired. There's a moment during Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's life where he sees an elderly lady at the bottom of a mountain. You and I were like, bro, I'm too busy. I gotta go home, eat dinner, wash up the kids, go to bed, watch my TV show, and go to bed. I don't have time to help nobody. No one wears more kufis than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one has more hats than the Prophet Muhammad. He's a general, a father, a messenger. He's a leader. He has all of these titles. Yet he stops to help this old lady. She has a camel, some luggage. They go up this mountain. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes her up this mountain and she says to him, your face is full of light. Your words bring me comfort. I want to share something with you, my dear son. There's a man that is corrupting the religion of the Quraysh. And his name is Muhammad. He's a bad person. And I don't want you to end up like him. This lady's never met the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she says, what is your name so I can thank you properly? He says, my name is Muhammad. And he smiles, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And she says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan rasulullah. She becomes a Muslim. So, what ends up happening is, Schafer is the speaker, the ambassador of Islam. He steps forth with all of the other Muslims that are in Abyssinia. And I want you to imagine this. This is like you going to your teacher and you're shaking like this, you're very scared. Or you go to your Baba and you say, Baba, I dropped my phone and I have a crack, and you get so scared. This is a king, bro. This is a king. He goes into the courtroom. Schafer is there and all the Muslims are there. The Quraysh, everyone that is a part of that he's leading, bows down like this. And the Muslims stay like this. We would compromise our religion. Your work says, trim your beard a little bit. Or you got to wear a hairnet if you want to cook. What is the first thing that we do? Schafer is in front of a king. These Muslims are in front of a king. And they don't even bow down. They don't sacrifice their religion. They're firm to their religion. So the Quraysh, they start to laugh and they say, the king says, what's wrong with you? You are in the company of a king. And Schafer says, we only bow down only before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mighty and the glorious. What? Now Al-Najashi, he's curious. He says, what's all this about? What do you mean you only bow down to God? He says, Schafer says, Allah has sent a messenger to us and told us to bow down to no one but Allah. Simple. Bro, imagine what the king's thinking. Like, who's this guy? This is Schafer, radiallahu anhu. So the Quraysh say, these people are causing corruption amongst the land. By the way, the Christians, they would worship three, right? The sun, they still do. The sun, they still do. The sun, the Spirit, the Holy Ghost. The Quraysh would worship over 300 idols. Their religions are completely different. So the Quraysh say, they're making a mockery of our religion. So Schafer is told to speak. MashaAllah, listen to this. He says, O king, very noble. He doesn't insult the guy. He says, you're still a king. I'm still going to respect you. He says, O king, we were people in a state of ignorance and immorality, worshipping idols, eating the flesh of dead animals, committing all sorts of bad deeds, breaking ties of kinship, treating people badly. And the strong amongst us exploited the weak. One of the reasons during the early stages of Islam that they rejected the Prophet Muhammad is because a lot of the children of the Quraysh, they were becoming friends with the slaves. How are you telling me that Bilal radiallahu an is the same as Abu Bakr? Because the only difference, and they would say, is the taqwa, is the righteousness that they have in their hearts. So he continues and says, we remained in this state until Allah sent us a prophet, one of our own people, who's truthful, trustworthy, and has integrity. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was never known to be a liar. But as soon as he said, I'm a prophet of Allah, they all said he was a liar. It's pretty embarrassing. And one of the children of the Quraysh, they said, Baba, we asked you about Muhammad years ago and you said he's the most honest person, always trust him. And now that he became a messenger, you're telling us not to trust him? Were you lying or are you lying now? I'll repeat that. The Quraysh, his son became a Muslim. And he says, Baba, you told me a year ago, before the Prophet Muhammad was a messenger, before that he was the most honest person. You've never heard him tell a lie and to always trust him. And now that he became a messenger, you're telling me don't trust him? Are you lying now or were you lying then? So he continues and says he calls us to worship one Allah. And I don't want to say the whole thing because it's rather lengthy. But in summary, it's basically that, the orphans we take care of the orphans. We don't hurt women. He ordered us to worship Allah, to give zakat, to pray. We believe in him, basically telling him about Islam, giving da'wah. By the way, this is the very first time that Islam was presented in the court of a king. Who did that? Ja'far radiallahu anhu. He says, thereupon, O king, our people attacked us, visited us with severe punishment, and make us renounce our religion, and allow us to go back to our old ways. They oppressed us and made our life intolerable, so we come here. Why did they come here? They said, because the Prophet told us that you're an honorable person. So, the king was impressed, and he was eager to learn more, and he says, do you have anything that your Prophet brought you here with? He says, yes. Ja'far says, yes. So Ja'far says, read it to me. You and I, when we give da'wah, it's very, very weird. It's very weird, right? We go to Google and we look up two bodies of water that meet and there's a barrier. Look, it's mentioned in the Quran, scientific evidence. That's a great way to give da'wah. You go to a person that is African American. Malcolm X, he became a Muslim. Read his biography. How does Ja'far give da'wah? How did 1400 years ago the Muslims, the Sahabas give da'wah? They went back to the Quran. They went back to the Quran. They would just recite Quran. So Ja'far begins to recite Surah Maryam. Why? Because in that you have characters, you have prophets that are familiar with the king of Abyssinia. So he starts reading Surah Maryam, and he starts talking about Maryam, the miraculous birth, so on and so forth. So An-Najashi says to Umar and the companion, get out of here. Get out of here, bro. I will never surrender these people to you. These people are very righteous. They believe in the same thing. They believe in Jesus. They believe in Maryam. They believe in this. What are you talking about? They're closer to us than you are, bro. Get out of here. So they start bribing a little bit more with some clothes. The next day they come back. O king, those people that you were meeting with yesterday, they talk bad about Jesus. Isa, they talk bad about him. They say he's not a god, but he's a prophet. And Najashi's like, what? Bring them in my court right now. Bring them in my court right now. So what ends up happening is, Ja'far, again, comes forward. He says, O king. He says, he's asked rather, what do you say about Jesus, the son of Mary? Ja'far says, regarding him, we only say what has been revealed to our prophet. And Najashi asks, and what is that? And he says, our prophet says that Isa is a servant of God and his prophet, and his spirit and his word, which is cast into Mary. And Najashi says, by God, Jesus, the son of Mary, was exactly as how your prophet described him. He even knew worshipping three gods, that's wrong. But why did he do it? Societal pressure. During the life of Isa, alayhi salam, what happened? The second he spoke bad about the priests that were doing wrong, that's the second they said, Isa's bad. We got to get rid of him. Why? Because the priests, they want to do evil things. So the bishops around, and Najashi was like, bro, what? You're a king. You're becoming a Muslim? So Najashi says, go, for you are safe and secure. Whoever obstructs you will pay for it, and whoever opposes you will be punished. For by God, I would rather not have a mountain of gold than that any one of you should come to any harm. So he goes back to the companions of the Quraysh and says, you see these two people? He goes to all of the generals. He says, I know you guys took gifts. I know you guys took bribes. Give them their gifts or get out of my land. I don't want your gifts. Get out of my land. You're causing... They're welcome here. They're welcome here. So it's mentioned that, and Najashi told everybody to leave, and Ja'far was right in front of Ja'far is right in front of Najashi. And Najashi says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. No one is there to witness. The very first king to accept Islam was witnessed by Ja'far. The very first surah and Quran that was recited was by the lips of Ja'far. The very first time Quran was recited in a kingdom, in front of a king, in front of Christian king, was Ja'far radiyallahu anhu. Now, it's mentioned that he stayed in Abyssinia for about 10 to 15 years with his wife. They have 3 children, which is very important. Abdullah, Muhammad, and another child, Aun. During the 7th year after Hijrah. So we're talking about years, over a decade probably, of not seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His cousin, his first cousin, right? So after the 7th year of Hijrah, he goes to Medina after the Battle of Khaybar. Now Asma, the wife of Ja'far, said, Abyssinia was very scary. We were very scared. People harmed us, and we suffered tremendously. So what happened? They migrated, they did a hijrah twice. The Muhajirin did a hijrah once. Many of the Muhajirin did a hijrah one time to Medina, from Mecca. Ja'far and his wife, they made hijrah twice. So, I want you to imagine the level of love that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for Ja'far radiyallahu anhu. They just defeated and won the Battle of Khaybar. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very happy. He's very excited for this victory for the Muslims. Imagine how much pain the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam endured for over 10 years in Mecca, and he's able to go to Medina, take refuge there. The Muslims are becoming a family, and he just won the Battle of Khaybar. And he sees 3 of his the family of Ja'far radiyallahu anhu, the wife Asma and Ja'far coming in, migrating from Abyssinia, traveling and traveling, dust on them. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam he takes by his face and kisses him right here, right between the eyes. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, I don't know what has given me more happiness, the Battle of Khaybar or seeing you, Ja'far. I don't know what brought me more happiness, the battle of Khaybar or you, Jafar. During Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's life, it's mentioned that he's keeping a very special dua for us. Where on the day of judgment, he will make sajda in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After we go from prophet to prophet saying, please tell Allah to start the day of judgment, and they all say, go to this person, go to this person, go to this person. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, I got this, don't worry. And he makes sajda in front of the throne, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Muhammad, raise your head and ask, and I will give you. He says, what about my ummah? He's thinking about us. It's mentioned that he was around his companions, his friends. And it's mentioned that when he was talking about the Muhajirin versus the Ansar, he says the Ansar are like my inner shirt and the Muhajirin are like my outer shirt. He says the Ansar are like my inner shirt because they are close to me, they're more near to me. The Muhajirin are like my outer shirt. Why? He's chilling with his friends, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I want you to talk about the reunion of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his beloved cousin Jafar. He's chilling with his companions and he says, I really miss my brothers. I really miss my brothers. And they're all looking at him like, we're your ride or die. What do you mean? We're Muhajirin, we're the Ansar. What do you mean? Where are your boys? We're your brothers. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, no, you are my Sahaba, you are my companions. My brothers and sisters are those that believed in me without ever seeing me. If anything, the Ansar being like the close garment of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we are in that same category. We are the helpers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why? Because we believe in the Prophet Muhammad without ever even seeing him. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So imagine on the day of judgment, drinking from his blessed hand, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imagine reuniting with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My brother, my sister, being so happy to see you. I don't know what brings me more happiness, O Jafar. The battle of Khaybar or seeing you. So a few moments in Medina of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that we know of. The daughter of Hamza, sorry I mentioned this was Abu Talib. This is the daughter of Hamza. After Hamza passed away, she runs to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And people, they wanted to take care of the orphans, especially the daughter of Hamza. And Ali receives her and leads her to Fatima. And Fatima says, take your uncle's daughter. Zayd and Jafar, they start to argue. Ali says, I have more right to her since she is my uncle's daughter. Jafar says she is my uncle's daughter and her aunt is my wife. So Asma was the aunt of Hamza's daughter. And Zayd said, she's my brother's daughter. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this is where you hear this moment. He says something to each of them, but he says to Jafar, you resemble me both in character and appearance. So when you think of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Jafar radiallahu anhu had a very similar character and appearance. So it's mentioned that Asma bint Umays, he mentioned this is the wife of Jafar radiallahu anhu, migrated to Abyssinia, and after a very long visit, he visits Hafsa, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Umar had been sitting with Hafsa at that moment. And I want you to imagine the scene. They just came back from Medina, and Umar bin Khattab sees Asma, and she's like, who's this person? I've never seen him before in my life. Who's this? And Hafsa says, this is Asma, the daughter of Umays. He said, she's an Abyssinian. Asma says, yes. So Umar said, we preceded you in migration. That way, and that is why we have more right to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So what has happened? We migrated before you to Medina, so we have more right to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is what Umar is saying. It's just something that they would say. But Asma felt a little bit annoyed. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he's like, I'm just stating the facts. I'm just telling you like it is. So it's mentioned that she's like, I'm going to starve myself until I see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So they bring Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, he says, his right is not more than yours. For him and his companions, there was one migration, but for you, for the people of the boat, there were two migrations. So that's how, so if anything, these muhajirin, these first that migrated, Ja'far, radiallahu anh, all of these people, they migrated twice. Like those that were able to migrate twice, it just shows that level of love. Now, subhanAllah, before we dive into the pizza in the back, inshallah, and I'll throw out some candy too. Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anh, he said, no one was better than Ja'far bin Abi Talib, wore a sandal, rode an animal, and sat on a saddle after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No one did it better except for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Until it's done? Okay. So the pizza's not ready. Okay. Now it's mentioned also that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he gave Ja'far radiallahu anh the nickname Abu Masakin, the father of the poor people. He loved the poor. You and I, when we see a homeless person, we're driving in our car, we see a homeless person, need food, and we're thinking, bro, how did this guy get a marker and a paper if he's homeless? If I give this guy $5, he's going to go buy drugs with it, bro. I'm not giving this guy my hard-earned money. Habibi, who told you he's going to buy drugs? Just give the guy money. Give him $1. Your kids see in the background, you tell them how he has to be nice to the poor, and you're driving and the person, Baba, who's that man? Oh, he has a sign that says homeless. Baba, we'll give him $100. You look at your son like, are you crazy, bro? Give him money. And what do we tell our kids? Baba, he's just faking it. How do you know? You just told your kid, have good, think good of people, right? You just told your kid we have to be nice to the poor. This is a poor man. It's mentioned that Ja'far used to hang out with the poor. And Abu Hurairah mentioned that we used to call Ja'far the father of the poor. And when he used to come to us, he would come closer to us. And one day when we came to him, we didn't find anything to eat. So he brought us a jar of honey. And there was no honey in it. Because Ja'far too did not have a lot of money. He broke the jar. He broke the glass and he put the honey in and gave it to the poor to lick the inside of the jar. You and I, we have the ketchup bottle, right? You squeeze it, the ranch on the pizza. You squeeze it, there's a little bit left. You give it one good shake, you squeeze it, and you throw it away. Then your mom opens the garbage to throw something in it, and she looks and there's a bottle of ranch. And she calls you, Ali! Yeah. There's still ranch in here. Look how much I got. Why you throw this away? Ja'far gave the glass to the poor and they licked the remnants of it. That's how poor these people were. We're not talking about like people that have a car, or these people had nothing that they would own. Their only food was the leftover honey that was the remnants. You know that ketchup that nobody eats that has like ketchup on the top? That part. That's how poor these people were that Ja'far would hang out with. Now, the battle of Muta in Jordan. This is a battle versus the Byzantine Empire. This is the first fight that Ja'far does fi sabilillah. And this is where we're going to conclude the remaining part of the talk. This is his first fight fi sabilillah with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet Muhammad did not attend this battle. It's mentioned also that they're very new in Medina. What is Ja'far doing? Is he kicking back and saying, bro, I need to just figure life out in Medina? No. Let's get to work. Let's get to work. It's mentioned that Ja'far used to travel and give da'wah when he was in Abyssinia. Now he's like, Bismillah, let's go to war. So what happens? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he gives clear instructions. He says, it's Zayd. Zayd, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's adopted son. This is a topic in itself who Zayd is. Zayd bin Harith, he says, if Zayd is wounded or killed, Ja'far bin Abi Talib would take over. If Ja'far is killed or wounded, then your commander is Abdullah ibn Rawah. And if Abdullah is killed, then let the Muslim choose for themselves a commander. Listen to this. The last thing is, let the Muslim choose who the commander should be. So it's mentioned that after this battle, 100,000 of the Byzantine Empire was there versus 30,000 Muslims. A fourth. A fourth of the Muslims, less than a fourth, were there. It's going to be bad, right? Listen to this. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's at home. He's at home, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this has happened a few times. I have some time to explain this, I guess. I have time. I have a lot of time. Okay. Okay, I'll share with you one thing about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam very quickly. So during the Al-Isra wal-Miraj, Isra wal-Miraj is like days and days you could talk about it. He goes on this journey from Mecca to Jerusalem. He prays with over hundreds and thousands of prophets, and then he goes on Miraj, where these steps come and they land in front of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's feet, and each step, one is gold, one is silver, one is gold, one is silver. Angels are on each side of the stairs, and there are rubies and jewels and gems embedded in all of the steps. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ goes on Al-Miraj. He goes up and ascends into the heavens, and he meets different prophets, right? He meets different prophets. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the gift of salah, the 5 daily prayers. This is a topic in itself. But it's mentioned that when he goes back to Mecca, and he's like troubled, he's just like staring. And a few of the Quraysh were like, "Hey Muhammad, what are you thinking about over there, man?" They're just teasing him, right? They don't really care. What are you thinking about? And they're like, "I don't want to tell you." He's like, "I can't tell you. You think I'm, right? I can't tell you I was just in the heavens. You already think I'm crazy, right?" So he's like, "I can't." He's like, "Nothing." And they keep poking at him. "Come on, tell me, Muhammad, what are you thinking about? You sure you want to know?" He says, "Yeah." So he tells them, "I went from Mecca to Jerusalem on a buraq. And then I went up in the heavens," and he explains everything he saw. "I saw Ibrahim, I saw Musa, I saw Harun, I saw Yahya, I saw Isa." It mentions that when he was traveling on the buraq, it would travel from here to as far as you can see. Every one step, that's how far it would travel. What happens is when he's traveling, Jibreel would stop with him. And he prayed in one area that Musa alayhi salam spoke to Allah on Mount Tur. Another area he stopped where Isa was born, the palm tree that Maryam shook. Another area that he stopped was in Medina, in Yathrib at the time. Another area that he stopped was a group of people that had camels. They were traveling back from wherever they were to Mecca, and they had a camel, and they were chasing after this camel. So the camel's in front of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He takes from Jibreel says drink. He drinks a little bit from the water, and he sees these people chasing after the camel. So what ends up happening is Rasulullah ﷺ, he tells the Quraysh say, "Was there a caravan that you saw when you went from here to Jerusalem?" Like, "Yeah, you know what, there was in fact. And they lost the camel and I drank from their water." Muhammad, really? This is what you're going to say? He's like, "Yeah, where'd you see the caravan?" And then he said some location. He's like, "Oh, that means they should be here by sunset." So what happens is this. It's Asr time, right before Maghrib. It's about to be Maghrib time. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they're waiting. This is like at Dhuhr time, he made this announcement. It's Asr. Asr becomes a little bit into almost Maghrib. And they're like waiting for the people to come, the caravan to come. When it would get dark, they would stop and they would sleep because of thieves and whatnot. They would stop in the dark. So it's mentioned that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he makes dua, "Oh Allah, please allow these people to show up." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala froze time. The sun stayed in its position for hours. And they're looking at the sun and they're like, "That's kind of weird. That's kind of weird. The sun is just staying there." So it's mentioned, the people came and the Quraysh run to him. And Abu Bakr is with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they asked these people, a caravan, "Did anything weird happen to you when you were traveling?" He says, "Yes, we lost the camel." "We lost the camel." He said, "Yeah, we lost the camel." So we had to run around looking for it. And you know what the weird thing was? The person that used to take care of the water, he says, "I filled the water all the way up. When we found the camel, a fourth of the water was drink." So they all look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and says, "Okay." The Quraysh are like, "Okay, what's going on here?" So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "I was in Jerusalem." So they're like, "Okay, Muhammad, listen. Tell me what Jerusalem looked like. Tell me about Jerusalem." The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam begins to describe Jerusalem. He blinks. He gets a little bit anxious. He's like, "Oh no, oh man, I don't want to say the wrong information." So what ends up happening is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends him down a 3D vision of Jerusalem. Right in front of his eyes, they're like, "Tell me how many doors there are." And he says, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's counting them. And when he says how many there are, Abu Bakr says, "You're truthful. He's spoken the truth." He says, "Tell me how many there are." 1, he tells. And he's right every single time. And Abu Bakr keeps telling him, "You're right, you're right, you're right. You're truthful, you're honest, you're honest." So what happens? Flash forward to this battle. So there's this vision that comes, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is able to see what's going on. This happened also a few other times. There was a companion that said, "I'm going to." After the battle of Badr, after the battle of Badr, one of the people of the Quraysh wanted to seek revenge, and he took the sword and he dipped it in poison and traveled to Yathrib, Medina, on the way to kill the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He told only one person. One person. He said, "Don't tell anybody until I get back. When you see me come back, you start telling people." He goes into the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's area and he takes his sword. And it's mentioned that Umar bin Khattab starts screaming out, "This is an evil person from the Quraysh, and he's here with bad intention." And he grabs him and holds his sword. And he bangs him up against the wall. And everyone starts surrounding the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells Umar bin Khattab, "Leave him. Let him be." So he says, "Why are you here?" He says, I just came here to tell you hello. That's it. The Prophet Muhammad says, "No, why are you really here?" He says, I swear. He says, "I swear I just came to you just to say hello." He says, "What did you tell?" And he mentions the person's name. I forgot which person it was. But he says, he mentions it. "What did you say that you were going to do to me, to this person?" He says his name. Jibreel told him what was going to happen. So he says, "There's no way you would know that except you're a prophet." And he says, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan rasulullah." So he had these visions. During this battle, it's mentioned that one of these visions came to him. And he's seeing the battle take place. He's seeing this battle, 30,000 versus 100,000, taking place in front of his eyes. And as he's seeing this battle, Zayd radiallahu anhu was one of the first people to accept Islam. He was the son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He loved him so much. And Zayd loved the Prophet Muhammad so much that when his actual father came to take him, he said, "No, no, no." Zayd was kidnapped. When his father, he looked over and over and over. They didn't have Facebook or WhatsApp. "Hey, did anyone see this person?" He looked and looked and looked until they found him. He says, No, I want to stay with Muhammad. He treats me like a son. I want to stay here." He sees the vision. He said, Zayd takes the flag, the commander of the army, and he was martyred. He died. So he loses his son. Then Ja'far took the flag and he was martyred. He died a shaheed. And as he's seeing this, the tears start to flow from the eye down to the cheek of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He saw his son and his cousin sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He starts to cry. They were passed. Then, when Ja'far took it and he was martyred, Abdullah took it and he was martyred. Who took the flag after that? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, the flag was taken by a sword amongst the swords of Allah. Who? Khalid bin Walid. Khalid bin Walid takes the sword. And Allah made them, the Muslims, victorious after that. 30,000, they lose 3 commanders. Khalid bin Walid takes the commander role and he wins. He wins it for the Muslims. But bittersweet because Ja'far, who just came from Abyssinia to Medina, dies. How did he die? It's mentioned that he was on his horse. How did he die as a shaheed? He was on his horse and he calls out, how wonderful is Jannah as it draws near. This is his first battle, fi sabilillah. Courageous. How wonderful is Jannah as it draws near. How pleasant and cool is its drinks. Punishment for the Byzantine, it's not far away. Ja'far goes out there. He becomes the commander. And he starts fighting. Fighting for Islam. What happens? Some scholars say 70 to about 80 wounds were just on his front. Why is that important? He never turned his back and ran away. He never ran away. In the Quran you find, about in terms of, I believe it's Surah Al-Salam, talking about the Battle of Badr. Don't turn away. Not meaning don't turn away and try to do a maneuver. Don't turn away and run away. Ja'far never ran away. He didn't see 100,000 people and says, I'm out of here. 70,000 wounds in front because he was always fighting someone. It's mentioned that when he was fighting, they cut off his right hand. His sword fell. He takes the sword with his left hand. He takes the sword with his left hand and they cut off his left hand. Then he picks up the sword with his arms. I want you to imagine that. He's not quitting. He takes the sword with his arms and they offer him water. They kind of break it up a little bit and they offer him water. And he says, I want to break my fast in Jannah. He was fasting on this day. I want to break my fast in Jannah. And he became a martyr. Radiallahu anhu. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as he's seeing this unfold, he says something. He says, Wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What? Who's he saying this to? No, who told him Salamu Alaykum? So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he's telling the people in Medina that he was in front of what's happening. So he says, Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And they ask him, who are you speaking to? He says, that was Ja'far bin Abi Talib in front of me with a group of angels. And the angels replaced his arms with 2 wings with which he can fly wherever he wishes in Jannah. And this is why he was given a few nicknames. Dhul Jahnain and At-Tayyar. The one that flies. Now, imagine that. Ja'far is flying in Jannah. There's a moment during the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's life where this person had a bad leg and he would walk with a limp. And what ends up happening is during the Battle of Badr, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave these people that had certain disabilities an excuse. You have a disability, it's okay. So this person, this companion, got so mad at his children. During the Battle of Uhud, he says to his children, shame on you, you kept me from dying as a shaheed in the Battle of Badr. Do not deprive me of dying as shaheed in the Battle of Uhud. So he goes to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and says, let me die fighting for the sake of Allah in the Battle of Uhud. So he goes and he fights and he sees him, he died. He had a limp. He used to walk with a limp. He says, it's as if I can see you in Jannah walking with no limp. Allahu Akbar. So what ends up happening is the aftermath of Ja'far's passing. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after this battle, his face is full of grief, losing both his son Zayd and his cousin Ja'far. 12 years together of Asma and Ja'far, and they just moved to Medina. Don't forget about his wife, Asma. Listen to this. Asma married two of the rightly guided Khalifas. After the death of Ja'far, she married one, and then after that person passed, another one was married. And there's this beautiful interaction between Ali radiallahu anhu and Asma. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with her. So 12 years, Asma and Ja'far were together. They just moved to Medina. Fresh start. Imagine you just moved to an area and your spouse passes away. Or you pass away. This excitement, how happy you are, new place, new beginning, and someone dies. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he goes to Ja'far's house and he meets his wife Asma. And Asma, she was getting ready to have Ja'far come back home. She's cooking, she's wearing beautiful clothes, she clothed and bathed the children, the 3 children that they have, got them all ready, made the house very nice. And when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ approached us, I saw a veil of sadness on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's face. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And I did not dare to ask him about Ja'far for fear that I would hear some unpleasant news. So he greeted me and he said, "Where are the children of Ja'far?" And the 3 children come and embrace Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he starts to cry so much. And he starts to smell their hair. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his tears are falling on the head of the 3 children of Ja'far. He smells their hair, and they're all so happy to see Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where are Ja'far's children? They come, they're so happy to see him. And he starts to cry. Asma says, "Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of God, why do you cry? Have you heard anything about Ja'far and his companions?" The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Yes. They've become a shaheed. They've become a martyr. They died. They passed fi sabilillah in war." And the smiles and laughters vanished from the faces of the children of Ja'far radiallahu anhu. And as soon as they heard the mother Asma crying and wailing, and women gathered around Asma. Asma was crying so much that she couldn't believe it. She started to beat her chest like this. And she's wailing, crying. Like that cry that people come to you and say, "No, you don't cry like this." So much. And her children, they were so happy. They turned around, they see Asma crying. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Oh Asma, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't beat your chest." He then prayed to God to protect the family of Ja'far. And then when the Prophet left Asma's house, he went to Fatima and said, who was also crying, "For such as Ja'far, you can easily cry yourself to death. Prepare food for Ja'far's family, for today they are beside themselves with grief." When someone passes away, we go to their house expecting for them to have food for us. When someone passes away, we go to their house. The last thing that they're thinking about is how much coffee I need to prepare for the people when they come over. What are we doing for people when their family dies? We should be making food for them. And that is what we learn through this hadith that Asma mentions. Now, it's mentioned that after some time, Asma gets married to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And they had a son named Muhammad Abu Bakr. Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr. What ends up happening is Abu Bakr passes away, and when Fatima passes away, Ali marries Asma. So she marries two Khalifas, Abu Bakr and Ali. So Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, and Muhammad, the son of Ja'far, start to fight. My father was better than your father. Ja'far is way better than, like you go to your heroes, right? Messi's way better than this guy, bro. Ronaldinho, forget this guy, man. LeBron James, forget him. Michael Jordan, bro. The children of these great companions are fighting. Ja'far was way better, man. My father. They're both named Muhammad. And they're talking about this. Ali, he can't say nothing. So he tells Asma, he says, you take care of this. You take care of this. You were married to Ja'far. You were married to Abu Bakr. You deal with this. So Asma says, I never saw a better young man than Ja'far. And I never saw a better older man than Abu Bakr. And Ali starts to he's like, what about me? You have Ja'far, who was young. I've never saw anyone better than him in their youth. And Abu Bakr was old. I've never seen anyone better than Abu Bakr. That was an elderly. And Ali's like, what about me? And Asma says, you are in the category of these two. You are in the categories of these two. This is the story of Ja'far radiyallahu anhu. And I want us all to take a few notes from this. First off is that the amount of love that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam had for Ja'far. And many of us had no idea who Ja'far was. Many of us had no idea who Ja'far was. Or maybe that we know that he went to Abyssinia and he gave da'wah to this king. But many of us have no idea that he shared the same characteristics as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Number two is the level of love that he had for Islam, for his family. That's something that Asma crying so much, so sad when he passed. This is Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a better understanding. With that being said, are there any questions from any of our youth, inshallah? Or of the older youth, inshallah? No? No questions? Bismillah. How far what? Oh, that one, it's a difference of opinion. I'll answer it, inshallah, after the talk. Any questions about the topic of Ja'far bin Abi Talib? Come see me after the talk. Any questions about Ja'far? Anything that you want to share about Ja'far bin Abi Talib? That was Ja'far, yes. Believe it's I have to double check. Get the candy out to these kids, mashallah. Give them all. Any other questions before we conclude? Okay, Jazakallahu khairan. Yes, Bismillah. When he accepted Islam, when Ja'far accepted Islam, younger than 7 years, 10 years older than the Prophet, 18 years different. He was about 17 years old. He was, about 17 years old. 16 or 17. How old was he when he passed? So if he was 20 when he went to Abyssinia, he was there for about 10 years, 12 years. He was in his late 30s. What is it? 30, 32, yeah. Yeah, 30, 32. So we're talking, subhanAllah, a lot of the companions were very young when they passed away. Fatima radiallahu anha was very young when she passed away, but she was, many of them were young, but their legacy is just beautiful. that they leave behind, subhanAllah. Yes. Ja'far's father is Abu Talib. Hamza's daughter's name, I'd have to look it up. Hamza's daughter's name, I'd have to look it up. The one that ran to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I have to look it up. It just mentions in this narration it's the daughter of Hamza. I'll look it up. خير. جزاك الله خيرا. بارك الله فيك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.